Hi, my name is Ilka Parent. I am from Minds of Motion, and I have prepared a little bit of a presentation, or actually several, so this is the first one that I figured it might be more personable if you actually see the face behind the stories and engage in something that I debated heavily how to present this. I'm not new to the field, but I'm just not very familiar with online stuff. So I figured, okay, I'll record it. You watch it in your own free time. And maybe we can have some discussions on this, or maybe it just these thoughts that I have and these presentations that I'm making will put your minds in motion, because that's what my aim is in equine assisted psychotherapy ever since I started about 20 years ago. So recently I made this presentation, or I wrote this article that I posted online on Equine Welfare. And some of you may know, many years ago, I started with the Equine Welfare Symposia, where I invited other people, a lot of great people in our field to present on equine welfare. And I realized looking back at it that I really didn't voice my opinion on that. I was so eager to get everybody involved that I just kind of stood by the sideline and watched it unfold. So I decided, okay, it's time that I speak up for myself and share some of my opinions that are just accumulated information, accumulated knowledge that I've gained in the last 20 years of working with horses and people in trauma therapy. So if we look at agency in equine welfare, I think that we need a new paradigm in our work, in the sense of that there needs to be a coexistence in equine supported practice. And what I'd like to offer here is not a set of definitions. I'm not going to give you another framework, and I certainly am not going to give you a prescription, but instead I invite you to a shift, a turn in posture, in attention, and how we hold the very question of what it means to live and work alongside horses. Equine welfare, as I understand it, cannot be reduced to a checklist. It cannot be guaranteed by routines of feeding or grooming or turnout time. It is not enforced through good intentions, and it is not achieved through procedural clarity. If you let that sink in, okay, I know that's kind of confrontational, but to me, welfare is not the absence of visible harm. Of course, it's important to not deliberately harm, and of course, it's part of welfare to not do harm, but it is not, to me, the mitigation of risk. It's not the appearance of comfort, and it is not found in the protocols we designed to protect the horse from us, which a lot of programs or a lot of people will do when they speak up. And this is not to diminish what they're doing or to lessen where their aim is, but like I said at the very beginning, I think there's a need for a paradigm shift. So instead, what I'm proposing, equine welfare, at least in the context of coexistence and in the context of how we work in PEAT, in psychodynamic equine-assisted trauma therapy, equine welfare is deeply relational. And by relational, I don't mean interactive. I don't mean bonded, and I do not mean connected, or I do not mean mutually responsive in some feel-good sense. What I mean by relational is, or a key to look at what relational means to me, is by asking yourself the questions: how is space offered? How is time shared? And how is meaning allowed to remain open, unassigned, and unclaimed? And for me personally, the last one is where I put the most stress on. In Pete, we approach the horse not as a resource, but as a being who co-inhabits the field. We do not bring the horse into the session to serve a role. This is so important when I hear about all these people talking about the horses being a therapist. And this is not, again, not to contradict in the sense that I do value the therapeutic meaning or the therapeutic contribution that can be examined, that can be proven when people are interacting with horses out in nature. There's absolutely a therapeutic value in that. However, I so vehemently speak up against horses being therapists. So we in Pete, we respect the horse and accept the horse to remain what and how he or she already is. And that is an autonomous, sentient participant with his own regulatory rhythm, his own perceptive logic, his own capacity to act or not act, to come closer or remain away. And it sounds so simple, doesn't it? And it's like when I talk to people, everybody will say that. But personally, from my own personal experience, even though I write and talk about this all the time, these are the things that I struggle with the most, because this ingrained thinking that we have, that I think is part of human nature, is that we will not look at horses this way. That even though we want to, we strive for it. I can only share from my own perspective, as embarrassing as it may be. But there's times when I find myself where I will attribute meaning to something, and I will not recognize, I will not look at something the horses are doing as part of their decision-making process, but instead will come up with some kind of, oh, that's instinct. Oh, the horse spooked, or oh, the horse is hungry, which it may just be. But at the same time, I find myself, and I've found myself over the years over and over again, of not considering a sentient choice, a sentient decision that was made by the horse. But if we do have that space, okay, that we consider that the horse is an autonomous sentient participant with his or her own regulatory rhythm, his or her own perceptive logic, his or her own capacity to act or not to act, for instance, to come closer or to remain away, in the space where the horse is not being used, not being evaluated, not being required to mean something or anything, that is the space that welfare then becomes possible. And even though I may sound repetitive, it is not welfare as in well-being the way humans typically define it. It's more a welfare as in wholeness, completeness, as in undisturbed agency, as in lack of interruption to what is already competent. You will hear me use that word often, competence. By using this word, I'm not referring to what the horse can do or how it behaves or how it responds. What I'm referring to is his or her inherent regulation, his or her embodied truth, his or her knowing him or herself, not in a human sense, okay, but in a horse sense. And the paradox is this: the more we try to manage, guarantee, or demonstrate that competence, the more we actually interfere with it. Because this competence cannot be given to anybody. I will say this again: competence cannot be given to anybody. Competence is inherent, it is in the being. So let me begin with 3 premises that may unsettle conventional welfare logic. I'm proposing that to do less is not neglect, and to refrain is not abandonment, and to remain present without steering the interaction is an act of ethical rigor. The horse does not require us to prove we care. The horse responds to us withholding interpretation. The horse responds to us stepping back from reflexive meaning making. Okay, as we, or a lot of us, have been taught and have practiced in equine assisted psychotherapy. The horse responds to us tolerating ambiguity. They're quite comfortable with that. The horse responds to us witnessing what emerges without transforming it into something else. Every time we interpret something, we don't see the horse. We attribute human meaning, psychological meaning, to something which means nothing to the horse. I will continue to kind of record my thoughts, my thought processes, kind of going along the line, exploring further the topic of equine welfare and agency. What is important to me is that, in my opinion, welfare is not delivered and it is not assigned. And it is not, nor can it be confirmed through a checklist or compliance. But instead, what I continue to propose and where I'd like to point the finger to is that welfare is made visible only in relationship, not just interaction. And even then, only sometimes. Welfare, in my opinion, appears in the tension between presence and intrusion, and it appears in the silence between approach and withdrawal. Welfare can be seen in how we hold ourselves, not as neutral technicians, not as caregivers performing any type of correctness, but as beings willing to remain unresolved. As you continue to listen and watch maybe some more of these presentations, I invite you not to take notes on technique, okay? It's not something that can be put down on a list, on a checklist. Instead, I'd like for you to take note and notice in yourself what happens in your own system when you stop doing. And what does it mean to be with a horse when there's no role to play and no outcome to reach and no structure to lean on? What happens to you, okay, when you don't have that structure to be? And what happens when we approach the horse not as a mirror or not as a metaphor and not as a therapeutic tool, definitely not, but simply as another presence equally entitled to withhold? Mind's in motion. Let me know your thoughts. Okay, give me your feedback. Critical feedback is always best, even though I don't want to be torn apart. But I'm new at this, the recording, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to hear from you.